Hello, welcome to the Family Values Podcast. My name's Joe Woods.
My name's Tom Hicks.
It's been an interesting week. We didn't record last week just because we were a episode ahead of ourselves and we had things to do. So it looks like the Labour leadership's starting to heat up again.
We've had the first candidate dropping out this week.
We had Jess Phillips, unfortunately, drop out, which I thought was a good contender for kind of working class northern votes and even just general working class votes. But I think I've turned out to be wrong by ignoring Lisa Nandy. Because obviously Lisa Nandy, she's not, let's be honest, she's not pro-Remain, she's not pro-Leave, but she did this game of being quote-unquote sympathetic to Brexit.
Yeah, so I believe the way that she's described it as Brexit curious, which is sort of being rhetorically a little bit more in line and willing to at least humour sort of Brexit voters. Although, if you look at her voting record on all Brexit, she has been pretty consistently voting with the opposition on that.
Well, I mean, I see her as Caroline Flint light, as in, and maybe Angela Leadsom light, which is obviously very pro-Remain before the election, and then as soon as all of their constituencies went Leave and Leave won, they switched their tune to, I understand it now, I'm now a Leaver, even though, okay, Lisa Nandy was never a Leaver, probably still not a Leaver, she has to keep her seat at the end of the day, which, by the way, that doesn't work. As long as you're a member of the Labour Party, or you're an MP for the Labour Party, you're out if your seat is overwhelmingly Leave.
Well, yeah, that happened. I mean, you would look at Caroline Flint, who was a sort of archetypical Labour MP, who would actually being very sympathetic to their constituents on the Leave vote.
Well, I mean,
but that didn't really help her.
Forget Caroline Flint. I mean, Dennis Skinner, one of the most ardent Leavers there is, was kicked out of his seat by a seat that knows he is very pro-Leave. Do you know why? Because they just no longer see. I say no longer. They never saw Labour as a Leave party.
No, and I think they realised that, and even though they have absolutely no love for the Tory party, they realised that Boris needed a government to get Brexit done, as it were. That message kept on going through, and it eventually actually stuck with people, I'd say, particularly in those constituencies.
I mean, I've said it on here before, which is, I also don't believe they no longer love the Labour Party like they once did. I think they now see the Labour brand as something they detest more than the Conservatives.
It could be entirely true. I mean, now I've not been up there to sort of do my own research or anything, but one thing I do know about that place of the country is that once they get an idea of we don't like this party in their head, it's very hard to get it out. And really, you have to make sure the other party are doing something worse so that people will be willing to vote for you. And that's what's been happening for the last 100 years with the Tory party.
I mean, it's built into their DNA, which is to hate a party. And now I think it's a cultural thing. Now I think that we're a generation or so removed from the miners and the industry workers in the north. Their kids have had their kids and their kids, because you have, no offence up north, but you do have kids quite young. You now have two generations separated from those industrial workers who now vote right because they've never been connected to the left.
No, they don't see the left as, particularly in the last 20 years, as sort of representing the sort of working class people anyway. Because particularly on the biggest issue of the day, where the working class were for Leave, they were just not even anti-Leave, but sort of quite. What's the word? Or at least from their perspective, looking down on them, liberal elites, they've become the party of the South.
They've become, exactly, that's the point I was trying to get to, which is they've become the party of the South in a lot of Northerners' minds, specifically the party of London, but to be fair to a lot of Northerners, anywhere south of Northampton is London, so
And you're becoming a much more sort of akin to what the Americans have at the moment, which is the sort of the urban parties versus the, I wouldn't want to say rural parties because it's not really all rural areas, but the sort of non-urban areas. But you still have places like Newcastle and Liverpool.
I mean, you have
still quite heavily Labour.
Very big urban areas up there that are just not the biggest cities, as you said, Liverpool, Newcastle, Manchester, that have gone Tory. I mean, you're talking about places like Mansfield and like Burnley, which are very urban areas. Very dilapidated very densely packed urban areas.
They're urban, but they're not metropolitan.
They're not metropolitan.
Which Liverpool and Newcastle are a bit more metropolitan. So I think there's actually an important distinction to make there between that.
Just to say also, we will be touching a little bit later on the current issues in the States, because let's be honest, we've neglected it for a while.
Yeah, we've been a bit more interesting over here with our crises, but they've got a genuine crisis of their own over there at the moment. So
I mean, to be fair, I mean the Democratic debate's finally kind of heating up in a kind of meaningful way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, naturally, we're approaching the caucuses, and the primaries. Did I say the primaries? Sorry, the fucking what is the term I'm looking for? The New Hampshire.
It is primary, yeah.
So we'll be touching on the current Democratic, the state of the Democratic debate. We'll also be looking at some impeachment issues.
Yeah.
But for now, we're going to jump, I think, a bit more hard into the paint into the Labour leadership.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, as we know, the last couple of days, Jess Phillips has dropped out.
Mm-hmm. She's the first one to go, and as you think, it's for a long contest. She has gone relatively early, but I think she knew she wasn't going to get on the ballot paper.
What do you think is the smoking gun as to why she couldn't get the backing she needed?
I would say that it seems to be the sort of media zeitgeist at the moment that she just hasn't been performing. Like, her performing on the backbenches, criticising, hasn't translated well into leadership role, as it were.
Yeah.
Like, when she has tried to mention the big sort of policy issues, she's sort of been tongue-tied and had to walk back, particularly on Brexit, where she had effectively made the argument on one of the Sunday shows that she would campaign to rejoin. Now, in reality, most people realise that most Labour leadership candidates will probably do that, but it's not the best time to come out and say it.
Well, here's the funny thing. I think there was such a big media push for... not for Jess Phillips, but kind of, there was a lot of people portraying, Jess Phillips could be this working class wild horse, dark horse who could kind of take the reins and the lead, because naturally, just because she sounds working class. I don't necessarily think she's working class from what I hear, and she's quote unquote northern. By the way, if you tell anyone up north that she's northern, because she's from Birmingham, the fucking battering you will get. They don't see the West Midlands as being the north.
Yeah, and it does show a sort of media bubble where anybody who doesn't have a hello type of accent is a northern.
If you're essentially, people talk about the Watford Gap and being north of Watford. By the way, the Watford Gap is not Watford. It is the border between Bedfordshire and Northamptonshire. So that makes a bit more sense. Anyway, if you're from north of the Watford Gap, so if you're from Northamptonshire upwards, we see you as culturally the north, and I do see that. Again, I've said this before. Myself, I know Tom is, has a lot of family and a lot of insight from the west of the country. All my family here are from the same two boroughs of London, so I'm very much London bubble. I see Northampton and the Midlands as the north. And I've been fucking slapped down by northerners on this before.
Yeah, whereas particularly, as I say, in the last 10-30 years, Midlands have tried to make sure that they are separate, because they do have a different separate culture. They have a different actual way of living out there.
I think I only have come to know this by knowing people from kind of inland West Country. So I know my boss is from Gloucestershire, for example. People from the West Midlands actually kind of identify more with the West Country, places like Gloucestershire and Herefordshire and Shropshire, because they border each other and they have a very similar culture than they are to the northwest.
Yeah, I would say that is definitely true. I mean, you think of it as almost just on a very basic sort of climate level, whereas they have a lot more hotter summers, and they don't have the sort of going out on when it's 5 degrees outside in shorts that you find there's a lot more common up north.
Particularly the kind of, what do they call it? They call it the Newcastle spring, which is where you go out in the dead of winter in a very small dress or a very in shorts, as you said,
Yeah, and they sort of almost see it as a badge of honour. And you see some people doing that in London, where particularly if they're going to the gym, but it's a lot rarer than you see it up north. Whereas that's why it's all fucking southern pansies wearing jumpers when it's 10 degrees. It's like, it's a bit chilly, come on.
So what it is, I think the whole idea that Jess Phillips, she's this quote unquote, working class northerner, I think that's one thing. I think a lot of northerners have found that patronising, because one, they don't see her as northern, two, they don't see her as working class, and then most importantly, what I'd say is the 60% to the 40%, she was pro-Remain.
Yeah, and that really sort of that's almost entirely only in rhetoric have you trying to appeal to us, where actually on a policy level, particularly on the biggest question of the day, she's still trying to play the same tune, possibly even more than the Momentum types who were at least who really didn't want to offer a second referendum. Yep. I mean, that's what they kept on blaming on their loss. It's like, it wasn't our policies, people like us, it was just a second referendum thing, which it has an element of truth in it, but is also conscripted.
Am I not right in saying that the Momentum, sort of the snakehead, so to speak, like Landsman and the like, their policy was second referendum, they just couldn't really get Corbyn for the first couple of years to commit to it?
Well, I think that they would have definitely, they're all more Remain people and would eventually like to get to a second referendum, but I think that at least looking at what they were blaming for their election loss, a lot of the Momentum types were blaming the second referendum for it, rather than blaming the policies. But I think that was more out of needs must, as it were.
Needs must, and not wanting to draw a light to the fact that, you know, in 2020, up north, socialist policies just don't play a wash like they used to. No,
the only people that actually seem to actually really be keen for socialism are people in inner London, which is extremely ironic, I would say, seeing as socialism is literally an ideology built to be appealing to the working classes in industrial places.
Well, it's hilarious in the sense that, like, London, a city, particularly inner London, is a city that is just fucking built, and again, London, I hate pointing this out, but London does generate 90% of the UK's economy. Mm-hmm. How so? Via, like, rampant, not unchecked, but, you know, it earns the UK's economy via the services.
Yeah.
Banking, trading. I mean,
a lot of businesses around Europe and around the world will come to London because they realise that the services are the best. It's pretty, like, it's just between us and New York who offers the best services in the world. And if you're competing with New York,
most of these people you'll find, for example, who do make up what I call the bloated body of Momentum, which are generally kind of younger people, 40 and below. These are people that work for the likes of marketing and digital media firms that basically exist within the city. To advertise for those big multinational financial institutions.
Yes, there is a weird layer of irony on that.
Yeah. And these people were supposedly socialists.
Yes, people who would never actually need socialism themselves because they make quite a good living.
They take part in free enterprise.
Yes.
It's against their own way of life.
Yes, but they think that it's sort of we need to be helpful, and it's I think socialism weirdly is more of a cultural badge these days than it is a proper economic policy that they want to implement. Yeah. Just because it's to use a possibly overused phrase, but it's woke. It's part of the woke portfolio, as it were. Mm-hmm. And I think that has a lot to do with it a lot of the time, rather than people thinking that socialism will actually be beneficial. I think they might believe that, but it's not the main aspect. If they could get rid of the socialism but implement a lot more of the sort of cultural and social policies, they would rather take that over actual implementation of socialism.
So to draw it back to Jess Phillips, she was not popular, definitely not popular with the London set. Again, I mean, the London set generally is pretty Momentum, and by set I mean the membership, because whether it be Momentum or Labour, or Momentum within Labour, because we don't know how the non-member Labour voting public of London feel. Generally, they're quite disparate groups. We don't know much about them in terms of, you know, they generally kind of vote on minority lines. So we don't really know how, let's say, Labour voters in Tower Hamlets feel, because they have a totally different agenda and way of looking at UK politics.
And they're, as you say, they're a lot more localised based on community-based issues, which particularly in places like Tower Hamlets do tend to align themselves with minority groups.
Exactly.
I've been talking to various people, as I have quite a big pool of left-leaning friends who voted for Labour, except a young person living in London.
Exactly.
And about 80% of them, when I've asked them, who do you like in the Labour leadership, have said, I haven't been paying attention.
Wow.
Which is very interesting, but kind of understandable, because when you take an election drumming like that, you just must get so disillusioned, and the fact that there's not going to be another election for a few years, you're like, I just want to check out on this altogether for a few months.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I, as a Lib Dem voter, I have not paid attention to what will be the upcoming Lib Dem leadership election.
Have they set dates for that? Have they done
Not yet, because we've got our caretaker leader, which, by the way, I'm actually blanking on in name. I've so just lost my way with that party. Not to say I won't necessarily vote for the next election. We have to see what happens.
One of the things I did like about the sort of Lib Dems thing is that they all have like 2 or 3 shadow cabinet positions.
Yep.
And they're not even calling it the shadow cabinet anymore because they realise they can't do that.
They can't do it because there's no way they could ever be opposition as things are at the moment.
No, but
it's fucking weak as the current opposition is. They're a weaker party.
Oh, well, I mean, they're the 4th biggest party now in Parliament.
Yeah.
By a long stretch. Like, the gap between them and the SNP is huge. Yeah. And,
I actually think they're now more irrelevant now than when they actually had less MPs post coalition.
Well, it's interesting because they did have an increase in the number of votes, but because it was I would say it was a very badly focused campaign the way that Jo Clinton ran it, because she just did she ran a national campaign on a party that actually needs to run on more localised issues if they actually want to have a chance of getting more MPs, as it were.
But going back to Labour, so very important and interesting news, and I actually texted Tom straight away as it came out. So this was the day that Jess Phillips dropped out. It was a day we also found out within moments of each other that a focus group had been taken in a Birmingham constituency, Birmingham Northfield, of the local electorate, mainly made up of ex-Labour voters, because it was traditionally a Labour seat until this election, as you can imagine.
It was made up of defectors, people who voted Labour and then voted for Tory. So these are really the people that Labour need to be concentrating on.
Yes, absolutely. And interestingly enough, so I don't think Jess Phillips had actually dropped out of the race yet, even though it'd been predicted all day. This was Monday, if I remember correctly. This group overwhelmingly, this study group, this focus group overwhelmingly found that ex-Labour voters would be pulled back to Labour by Lisa Nandy. And they also found, before we get onto the Lisa Nandy sort of rabbit hole we're going to go down, Rebecca Long-Bailey got no support, which no surprise to me or Tom.
No.
But obviously, I take it's meant the momentum will essentially go on the attack further on down the line.
I think it's going to get very nasty in the last about March time, when we're really starting to get into
reach the election day.
When people who haven't sent in their votes, particularly if it comes back that people are waiting to vote, because we get leaks from sort of Labour HQ as to how many people have returned their postal vote yet, because obviously
I will say this, and look, I'm not touching new ground by saying this, but I really don't know where momentum think they're going to go with Long Bailey up north. I know she's northern. It means nothing.
No.
You're talking about people who voted for Boris Johnson.
Exactly.
With Boris Johnson in mind.
Yeah.
I've got to say this to the Labour Party. Fucking shut up about the next woman needs to be a leader, needs to be northern. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
If I actually, look, I begrudgingly think... Again, I'm not a Labour voter, but I think begrudgingly Labour has to go for Lisa Nandy if they want any chance of winning the next election. And I say a chance. I'm not saying she's a shoo-in. I'm saying a chance.
She's going to be a lot more... If they can get back on the road to winning those people back...
Yep.
I mean, it could be the case, now, particularly as now Jeremy Corbyn has sort of set this in tone, where if Lisa Nandy, say, cuts the majority in half at the next election...
Yes.
She would have quite a strong argument to say, I'm not resigning, I'm keeping going, because that would be a better performance than Jeremy Corbyn got in 2017, where he increased it by a little bit, and managed to stop Theresa May getting a majority.
Yeah.
So I would say that she could say, I'm going to continue going on this work, and maybe we could have someone like Lisa Nandy in charge for a very long time, particularly if there is 4 years in between the next elections.
Yes, I mean, and let's not pretend that the next Labour leader is going to be Prime Minister, because that's just, mathematically impossible.
The next election, it would have to take an absolute landslide, a sort of Tony Blair realignment.
Nothing moves back that quickly, and we found that with Kinnock and Blair. The next figure has to be a Kinnock-like figure. And unfortunately, I think Nandy might have to be that Kinnock-like figure to take Labour in a bit more Brexit compliant. I'm not saying pro-Brexit, Brexit compliant direction.
With Nandi's rhetoric on Brexit, it gives her a lot more legitimacy to criticise things that are going wrong in the Brexit process, because she has been a bit softer on her language.
Yes.
So people are more willing to listen to her than someone like Emily Thornberry, who has been so vocal, pro. No, it's not anti-Brexit, pro-Europe and pro more European integration.
Could you think of a more polarising figure?
Oh no,
than Thornberry.
Like she makes Boris look like a unifying figure.
Yeah,
like that's how people like. I can't understand anyone who thinks that Emily Thornberry would be a good Labour leader.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd love to see it because it would just solidify Tory.
Don't get me wrong. Just before we do go a bit further, I mean, for some reason, alongside Nandi heading up the polls, the last fucking bet we saw was that it's now 5-1 on Nandi, but I'd actually say it's now probably narrowed since Jess Phillips has dropped out.
Yeah.
Thornberry has now gained a bit more support, and she has not dropped out, and it looks like she potentially may now have the support to get onto the next ballot.
Yes, that is looking more and more likely.
Which begs the question, who the fuck's backing her? We don't know. It seems to be with Shadowy. She's got no union backing.
No. I think she's got some local party support, because that's one of the sort of... there's two ways to get onto the ballot. You can either have 2 or more Labour affiliates, which have to also be unions, or you can get a certain percentage of the local parties to back you.
Right.
Which is it was quite a high bar, but Emily Thornberry seems to be gathering up momentum to actually get onto it.
Mind the pun, yeah.
Yeah.
Which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, because who is her camp?
Apart from sort of really pro-EU rejoiners, and even that, you've got other candidates who are sort of basically saying that as well.
Because you would assume, like, her camp is essentially the Keir Starmer camp, which, like... You know, Keir Starmer is definitely a more sensible candidate than Thornberry.
A more sensible, more likeable, actually, a lot more sort of...
presidential, so to speak.
Yeah, and because he's got a little bit more of a clean slate, as it were, he's not as known to people and their policies aren't baked into the cake. He has a bit more wiggle room.
As much as we talk about Thornberry being part of the shadow cabinet alongside a lot of heavy momentum hitters, she's been part of the Labour fabric for like as long as I've been conscious of politics.
Yeah, she's been there or thereabouts for a long time. I think she's been a consistent feature of the shadow cabinet for a long time. Was she actually in the cabinet?
I think she was in the late cabinet under Brown.
Right.
I think so.
There's probably a lot of Labour MPs that were in that cabinet.
No, because you're now talking a decade since that was the case.
Yeah, and a lot of the ones that were in the cabinet would have been like people like Ed Balls and whatnot.
I think she held lower tier or mid tier kind of position within the cabinet. I can't remember what her role was, but she was there. I definitely remember it. I remember around the time she made that shooting in the foot tweet.
Yes.
Yeah, in Rochester. How long ago? 6 years ago now.
Yeah, and you can tell how dated that tweet was because it was basically a caption. Like you would never send a tweet like this now, just from
I remember her. I remember thinking then when she did that, the post of the Union Jacks for swinging from the house in the van.
Yeah, the St George's flag.
And putting hashtag black. Oh, sorry, did I say Union Jacks? Sorry, the St George's flag swinging from the house in the van, and then hashtag Brexit, hashtag Rochester.
Yes,
and. I remember thinking then she's been a staple of the Labour Party forever.
Yeah, and she had, which is why it was such a big story. Like if a random newly done MP had done that, they might have got a slap on the wrist from the whip, but it wouldn't have got the attraction that it had done in the media. What amazes me about that whole situation is her excuse that she gives, because this gets brought up with interviews. I think it was Ma who brought this up, and she said to Andrew Ma, well, you see, there's a misunderstanding with that, because what I was actually doing is I was taking random pictures of Rochester to let people know what it was like on the campaign trail. So it was actually completely taken out of context. So she's not even admitting she did anything wrong.
Well, that's what I was going to say. She's actually stepped further in the pack there, because she's actually just admitted to what we all thought, which is she's taking pictures of Rochester to see what it was like, and what she's saying by that is how fascist it is. Well, that's what she's giving off.
Well, that's basically what she had said, but she just said, but I wasn't saying that it was bad. I was just saying that it was there. It was like, no, you were clearly saying it was
shit.
Yeah, to think that people can't see through that, particularly the people that you're inadvertently taking the piss out of.
Yeah. And also, the Labour Party trying to fight for a fucking Medway seat is just funny anyway.
Yeah, I think particularly in the shadow of Brexit, it just doesn't seem to.
I mean, that was, to be fair, that was pre-Brexit. It was the height of the call for Brexit. It was height Farage era, but it was. I mean, this was the second seat the second and last seat that UKIP took. At that by-election.
It was one of the only elections that they might actually want, wasn't it?
Yeah, there was only two. There was only two where they ever took a seat. They first took Clacton, and then they took Rochester. Clacton they took by what's his tits, very divisive figure within the Conservative Party, Creswell. Defecting and going to UKIP because he knew it would help him even further in Clacton if he went to the fucking UKIP, and he did, and and then. That was the first and only seat that UKIP ever actually won without a defection. It was just, they forwarded their candidate and he won.
And he had already been obviously locally known to it, so that had given him a big boost. So there wasn't any sort of, even with the sort of national presence of Farage, he never actually won a seat, and he never even tried to win a seat under the... did he try to win it in 2019? I don't think he did.
No, he didn't stand in 2019, but he stood... for UKIP in 2015.
He didn't stand in 2017 at all.
I think it was in his home constituency. I think it was Thanet. And then in 2017, he stood. I'm certain he stood, but it wouldn't have been for UKIP.
I don't think, because he had left with UKIP altogether.
No, hang on, he didn't stand in 2017. What was he talking about?
Because he was taking a sort of hiatus, as it turned out to be, from politics, which he said was a retirement, but everyone kind of knew it wasn't.
So, back on track with Labour leadership. So, I don't know if I've just mentioned this. So, focus group, Lisa Nandy comes out on top. Rebecca Long-Bailey has no support in the focus group. These are ex-Labour members. We've covered Long-Bailey in regards to, I think, Momentum really can't see... we don't just say Momentum as a separate group, because essentially they hold sway within the Labour Party. They can't see beyond their own fucking arses on an ideological level that they really think that it was the right message at the last election. It was just the wrong person telling it. They needed a northern woman, not a southern man. It means nothing.
It's so patronising to basically just say, we just didn't have that. I mean,
our ideology is so... perfect and everyone loves it, particularly if you're because the far left idolizes working class. They fetishize working the idea of being working class, yet not being working class and not knowing working class people to the point where they don't know the actual beliefs of the working class, particularly up north. As me and Thomas said before, it is generally a very socially conservative bunch.
And it always has been, and it's only because of the sort of industry relation to the fact that they really did define themselves for going on 100 years as the sort of workshop of England up north. And that was a direct sort of went so well with the Labour message when they were actually the Labour Party. I mean, an interesting poll which I saw as well, which was actually a poll of Labour members seeing where they were, how they identified in their values, was that only 12% of Labour members identify with as the Labour Party as workers, as the party of the workers. And you're just thinking, if you're actually telling a poll that, then not even just sort of on a question and answer basis, what actually are you? You should really rename your party, because you're not really the Labour Party anymore, are you?
Yeah, absolutely. So Long-Bailey, absolute wrong choice by Momentum, but they just can't. Again, they can't accept they've done wrong, and they will not even when Long-Bailey potentially loses that next. I say potentially because there's also a chance that she could probably win it. Unfortunately, if Long-Bailey loses that next the leadership election, they'll still double down on. No, there needs to be a socialist candidate, and they'll try and destroy it ahead of the party somehow.
Oh, they'll go straight back to where they were under the Blair era as well. They'll basically, I have no doubt, I think Jeremy Corbyn is really looking forward to that. I think he almost, on a sort of personal level, he would almost prefer them to be a centrist candidate, so he could go back to being the sort of great stop the war.
As MPs, who, Momentum-aligned MPs, they like earning their 80 grand a year, while getting to be being able to be the professional protesters they are. Because they get to hold on to very, very, very safe seats, the safest seats in the country, inner London seats, and they get to be literally professional protesters.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like a cushy job to me.
And they don't never actually have to follow through with any of their ideas because they don't actually gain power.
And look, and once Corbyn steps down as party leader, which will be in a few months, he is old enough that he could actually now follow through in Parliament, literally. He could be sitting there, fall asleep and shit himself. So he's got a job for life.
Imagine if he becomes Father of the House.
No, he's got too many enemies in that fucking
Well, I think Father of the House is basically how long have you been there? And
True.
he could actually, because he's got such a safe seat, he could just stay there and just become that sort of ceremonial role.
I think Dennis Skinner was the until last month was the oldest, not just by age, but was the longest serving MP in Parliament.
But people thought he was going to be Father of the House after Kenneth Clarke resigned.
You're right, yeah, because Ken Clarke was resigning at that election, and Skinner lost his seat.
Yes.
Who's Father of the House now?
It's some Tory who I can't remember the name of.
Right.
He was not a famous Tory actor.
It's not Nick Sower.
No, it's not Nick Soames. He's not far behind though.
Yeah. We're just checking who Father of the House is now, because obviously current speaker is what's his tits, the old Labour Northern.
Lindsay Hoyle. So Lindsay Hoyle.
Yeah.
Yes. It's Sir Peter Bottomley.
Oh God, how Harry Potter sounding is that? I did not know he'd assumed the position. So
I'd only seen it sort of on YouTube when they were doing.
Oh my God! I mean, talk about a safe fucking Conservative seat, Worthing West.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose Worthing could potentially go Labour, but yeah, or Lib Dem. I'd say potentially more Lib Dem seat, but it's
because he was in 75, so he came in.
Oh, okay, yeah, because what's his name? The Skin Man was 70, so yeah.
Yes.
I mean, when Ken Clarke was 70, he was late. Was he later than that? Because Ken Clarke, am I right in saying, was like a year or two younger than the Skin Man?
He wasn't too far off it, no, but Kenneth Clarke had just been in there longer. But interestingly, this guy has, he's not actually, he's held some junior minister positions, but he's never actually been on the front bench. He held some junior minister positions under Thatcher, so you can imagine that he was quite, he's gained super, well.
Everything about him screams fucking Lib Dem. He was born in Shropshire. He represents Worthing. There's something very west of the country about him that is like, but yeah, he's a Conservative member of Parliament.
He contested Vauxhall in 1973. That must have been fun.
Yeah,
that must have been against.
I mean, when the fuck, even in the early 70s, when the fuck would the Conservatives ever have won Vauxhall?
No, but they do that a lot to the young guys. They'll throw them in.
They'll have to haze them by putting them through an election they can't win.
Yeah, I remember actually going to the pub with one of the Tory party candidates for Leighton and Wanstead.
Oh, good luck.
It was actually even before Leighton and Wanstead were put together, so it was just Leighton, and it was absolutely no chance. You get like a few thousand votes.
I mean, you could argue that the Wanstead vote could potentially push it forward, but even Wanstead is quite a Labour, is kind of a rich Labour area.
Yes, it's gone that way, particularly in the last few years, where it's become the sort of metropolitan middle class.
It's very Islington-esque.
Yes, that's all about
in terms of its voting demographic.
Yeah, it's a little slice of sort of West London.
When people disparagingly talk about the current Labour voting base, which is kind of very professional, very middle class, quote unquote champagne socialists. That's Wanstead. I mean, it's a little bit further out in Islington. It's zone 4. It's not, it's borderline zone 3 and 4. It's not zone 2, but it's still very much like built up inner London, very wealthy professionals. Beautiful area. I love Wanstead.
Yeah, it's a very nice.
It's
area.
very local to where we live.
I
mean, literally, we could now walk out this flat where we are now, walk across the roundabout, and we could be at Wanstead High Street in about 10 minutes.
Yeah. It's an interesting area because it's quite trying to be so middle class. It's got that big sign that says Wanstead Village up there.
Yeah.
But there's also weirdly
that's a very new sign. It's made to look like an old Essex.
Yes, it is.
An old Essex village sign in the middle of like the village green, but it's literally been put up within last year.
Yeah, it's quite funny. But there are also this weird element that there are still like weirdly like some gangs from the States, not in Wanstead, who have territory in Wanstead, and you could see them, and you're like, what are you doing here?
I'm not going to name the gang, but they were a big fixture when I was a kid. So you'd turn up at parties around the area, and then like there'd be one gang at the party, and then this other gang would turn up, and either someone would get stabbed or the police would turn up, and there'd be some kind of you have to stay in the house, and then the gang inside the party gets paranoid and starts turning on everyone else inside the party. The point being, that gang you're thinking of were a big fucking fixture when I used to fucking go to parties around that area as a kid, and I've seen them bowl people and then get into fights and knives pulled and all that shit. And they're from an estate that backs onto Wanstead High Street that sits in between Wanstead High Street and Redbridge Roundabout.
Right, I don't know what you mean.
Yeah, it's called, they're referred to as YG. So, and that, I mean, once you get to Wanstead High Street and you turn left and head towards Redbridge Roundabout, totally different fucking area. Rough area. Quite a traditionally Asian area, where Wanstead really is not Asian at all. But I think now quite a Romanian area, as like a lot of areas of Redbridge and Ilford are.
Yeah. It is very strange, the sort of different demographics, you say, just from that sort of road coming from Wanstead down to Redbridge Roundabout.
Quite a poor area.
Yeah, how it changes.
Noticeably poor.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, where was I going with this? Lisa Nandy. Fucking hell, how do we get that far off? Nandy seems to be gaining a lot of support. First, there was that focus group. Same day the results of that focus group came out, GMB, the second biggest union in the country, come out and backed her. A lot of the unions are quite conscious of their members being very pro-leave. They all voted leave.
And the unions want power. The unions really main focus is power. And I think they've recognised that the Corbyn project, or the Corbynista project, as it probably is, we know now, is just not going to get them there.
Yeah, so they want someone who's generally quite left-wing, but is very outwardly pro-Brexit, because you have to remember Corbyn, as much as he was pro-Brexit, he was not outwardly pro-Brexit as he became leader.
He was pro-Brexit before it was called pro-Brexit, but he was never actually pro-Brexit once everybody knew the term Brexit.
He was literally a Brexit hipster.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. He was Eurosceptic for a long time.
He was just a relic of what the Labour Party was in the 70s, which was very, anti-EU.
I will wonder as well, once he gets back into the backbenches, whether he'll get back on that, whether he'll start criticising the EU and praising Brexit.
I don't know.
I doubt it, but it would be funny.
I think being the leader of a very pro-Remain and pro-Remain group within the party, and then the party itself, I think has probably changed his outlook a bit.
Possibly,
or at least his outward look towards the EU. Not his outward look, but his outward interactions with the EU, I think, has changed by way of him being party leader.
Maybe it's sort of a thing of, well, now the Tory parties want to leave, so screw that, I'm not going to be on the same side as the Tories.
I think the reactionary right-wing relationship with the EU of the last few years, I think it changed him before he became party leader anyway.
Right.
Because I know how the far left works. When the right have a cause that coincides with what theirs already was, they change tack.
Yeah, no, I can see that. I mean, you can see that with Donald Trump in America in very particular, where they anything that Trump does, even if it was supported by Democrats up until that moment, will immediately become the complete heresy. And actually, we agree with all the other arguments,
i.e., pulling troops out of war zones.
Pulling troops out of war zones. The TPP is another good example. We got rid of it on day one, and some people on the left were criticising for it, who had been arguing against Hillary Clinton while she was running in a Democratic primary, which
all
is
of
very
those big NAFTA and any of those kind of big economic trade blocks that, or sort of potential deals, i.e. TTIP, which was coming up with us. All these deals that the left were against, as Trump comes in and says, right, we're pulling out of them in this very kind of reactionary, populist way, it flips over. Yeah. Just like with the EU. The EU... immigration within the EU flipped the traditional standpoints left and right on their heads.
Yes, because it used to be based on economics, and where the EU was seen as the sort of open market capitalist section, which pissed off people on the left, and people, particularly sort of Thatcherite people, were very pro for it, because they thought, well, this is securing capitalism for the long term within Europe. Yeah,
absolutely. So it's... Going back to Lisa Nandy again, we keep going off track.
It's just not very interesting, is it?
No, it is interesting. I mean, the very fact that there's been this very reactionary swing by the GMB to back Lisa Nandy. You're now Lisa Nandy's been brought to the forefront, which she really wasn't for the longest of time. You're now hearing pro-Brexit, particularly Northerners, and even from the South, backing Nandy, people who traditionally voted Labour, who were Leavers from the South and North, now saying they're backing Nandy.
Which I think is going to be very interesting, particularly with the second preferences, because you can imagine a lot of people who are going to first preference Starmer are going to second preference Nandy. If we ignore...
here's the thing. I think this is interesting because I don't think the centre of the party are going to back Nandy.
Really?
Yeah, and I think this could be Nandy's anti-climax, which is just generally by way of being not pro-Leave, but outwardly sympathetic to Leave voters. I think it makes her not attractive to the centre of the party, even though she very much comes from the centre of the party.
Right. So you think they'd rather take Long Bailey over?
You have to remember the centre of the party is gearing up that once that in their minds they take over the party again via bringing Starmer in, they're gearing up to push for a second referendum.
What?
Yeah.
Seriously?
And actually, not even necessarily a second referendum, but as they put it, they're looking to gear up to push to rejoin the EU. This is what this is about. The centre of the party, which again I have the utmost sympathy for. I am a liberal centrist. I hark back to the days of Blairism. But unfortunately, they can't, just like how Momentum can't get their head out their arse on not backing these overtly socialist left-wingers, the centre of the party and the old establishment of the new old establishment of the party, they are gearing up to fight to rejoin.
Well, if I was going to give, I'm not in there.
They're already talking about this.
If I was going to give some advice to the people who genuinely, with all their heart, think that we need to rejoin, wait a few years after we've left, and then, if you're correct, the negative impact will start to actually have.
Thornberry, and I think this is maybe why Thornberry might have seen a slight uptick in the last few days. Thornberry has already said for weeks she will be standing on a platform of rejoining. And I take it, if she's taking that tack, Starmer will be taking that tack further on down the line. He's not taking it now because he's trying to come across as, one, someone who's sympathetic to the far left, and two, someone who's not rocking the boat on Brexit, because he did ultimately rock the boat on Brexit.
If they keep up with this, Boris will call another election in 2 years and he'll smash it again.
Yeah.
Because why wouldn't it?
Yeah.
If you're still replaying the same arguments, then people are going to be hyped up about Brexit. And then when they actually do leave, which will probably be an extension after 2020, at the end of 2020, because I'm still doubtful we'll probably leave at the end of 2020, because it's just not enough time. Once that gets extended by 2 years or whatever, then he'll have another election, because people will still be in the Brexit mode if Labour keep on hammering on about rejoin, and people will still be in their camps. I
kind of agree with you on a just gut feeling that we're not leaving at the end of 2020, which is a feeling of essentially not having the red tape issues out of the way. But do you not see Johnson in a very populist, I don't care about red tape, we need to do this for matter of votes, just pushing through a no deal with that in the 2020 if that's not the case?
What I reckon he'll try and do is he'll try and sell it as a staggered leave thing, where basically he'll get more, because we've already seen this week.
You mean like he did in October?
Sort of like saying, okay, we're going to leave officially at the end of January, and then by the end of December we're going to come out of alignment on these certain issues, but we're still in the process of debating the entire trade deal, so we're going to extend it for a little bit, and we're going to be able to divulge a little bit more, and basically it will be a staggered leaving, which I think is probably the most sensible way of doing it. He's not outwardly saying this is what he's going to do, but I would say that's probably the most sensible way of doing it, because we do have to leave in part, so that it's more of a frictionless leave. I was always against the idea of no deal apart from if the EU basically said you can't leave at all.
Right, yeah.
So that was sort of my red line on that thing, because I do think that leaving in a staggered way is probably the least a negative impact that you could have on the economy, as it were.
Yeah.
And I think he'll be able to sell that because he's still going to have a lot of political capital as long as he doesn't piss it away on like scandals on affairs or shit like that, which is not up the right side of the
Here's the funny. Well, that's a funny point to bring up because how far are we now into his premiership? Are we now 6 months, or is it longer than that?
It's about 6 months, I'd say. Yeah.
And we haven't had the Boris-like scandals yet during his reign.
We had the one about when his contact when he was mayor, and I think a lot of people sort of looked at that and said, okay, it might not look entirely kosher, but at the same time, it was a number of years ago and whatnot.
Because if you're not from the UK, just give some bit of context to this. Think of Berlusconi 10 years ago. Boris Johnson has a very similar. He has a very similar kind of way of life. I'm not accusing him of fucking 17-year-old hookers, but he has he's just scandal prone.
He has an interesting relationship with the fairer sex, to put it mildly. Let's put it that way.
He's predicted, he won't say, but he's predicted to have about 6 love children.
Yes, all of sort of tall, skinny blonde women. So
basically, our Prime Minister will not let his own public know how many kids he has.
No, he doesn't trust the media because he doesn't know himself.
I find that again. I personally don't give a shit, but I could see why people who are maybe a bit more socially conservative might go, well, how can we trust him if we don't know. If he won't fucking tell us how many kids he has. But then again, most socially conservative people voted for him, so what the fuck do I know?
Well, this is it. I think it's more sort of almost the devil you know about, well, he's better than Corbyn, and at the end of the day, fuck it, why not? He's appealing, and I think Tory party members are a little bit more better at being ideologically practical than Labour Party members, as it were, particularly recently.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you can see that in essentially ignoring scandals, bluffs, prior comments.
Because he's electable and appealing to people outside the Tory party.
Absolutely. Whereas he's for the greater good.
Yes, pretty much. He's more benefits than drawbacks.
Yeah.
Even if the drawbacks do poke at the heart of a lot of social conservatives.
So closing thoughts on that, on the Lisa Nandy and the current Labour leadership issue, because we've pretty much done near enough 50 minutes on the Labour leadership. I begrudgingly think, and again, they're not my party necessarily, but I begrudgingly think that they need to go Lisa Nandy. What about yourself?
I would say that would be the smartest way if they want to claw back some of the seats they lost last time, and also move away from the brand that has been Labour over the last 5 years, because they need to move away of that if they want any chance of actually regaining power. So,
Keir Starmer, who obviously, as we knew, was the early front runner in this fight, he has temporarily, and it's been this way I think since Monday, or maybe a little bit longer than that, has temporarily halted his campaign due to quote unquote family issues. I don't know. It could be absolutely temporary. It could be legit. He may come back, but a lot of times during these leadership campaigns, when that happens, it means they're letting the bellwether do its job, and then they drop out if it seems he's not going to be backed.
Yeah, he might have even thought that possibly now's the wrong time to run. Maybe to build his profile up a little bit, he'll be the front runner, and then let the next Labour leader take the sort of hit.
Because he's basically being told he's a Blair figure.
And he's a man.
I think he maybe some advisors around him are telling him, do you know what? Let there be a new leader. Let there be this Kinnock figure that basically has to deal with the inner fight within the party, and then you coming as the actual Blair figure you are.
Or even better, from a sort of Labour leadership thing, from contest perspective, let Momentum win again, and then people will be a lot more willing to go to a centre if we have 2 or 3 more years.
That's a big fucking ask, because that's dangerous if that's the because obviously I don't mean to scream and shout as if that's actually how he's been advised to look at this, because at the end of the day we don't know that. But if that is the case, that's fucking dangerous, because it will just push the North and the old home base further to the right, and
it's wishful thinking.
Well, as we know about the Momentum and Labour membership, particularly in the South, is they're just entrenched.
Yes.
They will further entrench. They will double down on further socialist policies. They will keep fucking sniffing their own arse and then wondering why they didn't win again at the next election, and then they'll be blaming everyone else around them.
Yes.
And then, guess what? Goodbye, the left has lost the North.
Yeah, I think to sum up, I'm going to go back to an Alan Johnson quote, which he said at the beginning to one of the Heads of Momentum after the exit poll came out on the election night, which was the working classes have always been a disappointment to Momentum, and they're like...
Okay, let's fucking close that on Labour there, because we're now going to cross the pond. We are going to British Airways this. We're going to go first Democratic race, Democratic leadership race. Take it away, Tom.
Okay, so we are actually, finally, after a year or more of actually looking at the Democratic things, hearing these names that become actual household names, Warren, Sanders, Biden, Buttigieg and whatnot, we're only 2 weeks away from the Iowa caucuses, so it's actually getting pretty exciting, and it's getting pretty heated, particularly around the Sanders camp. You've had a few events that have been made a lot more tension. First of all, you had the issue with between Warren and Sanders, where Warren basically leaked this idea that Bernie had said he didn't think a woman could be president, which was very, very skewed. And what would most likely probably happened is that Bernie would have said something along the ilks of, it would be very hard for a female candidate to win against Donald Trump. And the Warren camp has sort of twisted and spun this in a way to say, look at Bernie, he's actually secretly sexist. Which anyone who knows anything about Bernie Sanders thinks that's utterly ridiculous.
Yep.
Particularly as the Sanders camp released a video of him talking to small children in 1988, saying, girls, you can be president as well.
Yeah.
So it literally 30 years ago. It's just utterly ridiculous that this dying-the-wall socialist, social justice guy, well, not social justice in the modern term, but in the traditional term at least, would be saying that a woman couldn't be president. It's just ridiculous on the face of it.
And in turn, I mean, looking at these polls, I mean, this has been a talk of the town over the last few days, the last few weeks anyway. Warren's campaign has taken a real hit because of it.
Oh yes, definitely. You can see in the last couple of weeks that it's just completely dropped, and most of that has gone directly to Bernie, and he's picked up some places as well, because of the drop of Pete Buttigieg. And he's actually rising in the poll. We're looking at the real clear politics average of polls.
Can I just say it's interesting? Okay, that makes sense that any drop-off that Warren takes in support will go to Sanders, but the idea that Buttigieg, any drop-off he has goes to Sanders is fucking insane.
Well, it's interesting because I think a lot of particularly sort of people are just getting interested in the Democratic primaries. What you got to remember about the Democrat primaries is they're open to anyone who's a registered Democrat, not just to members of a party. So there's a lot of people who don't actually pay that much attention to politics who then go and vote in the thing. So they're not maybe as in line with the sort of intricacies of left-wing versus centrist in the Democratic Party. They're more actually on the sort of face of it, and particularly in the last few weeks, who they feel is better. Because a lot of them have the same policies at the end of the day, particularly now, where a lot of them have taken up the policies that Bernie ran in 2016. And even Buttigieg has been paying lip service to this, even though he will go a lot more harder to the centre in the general than say Sanders or even Warren. I
mean, Buttigieg generally was the kind of the centre of the party's second choice.
Yes, he's very much a big money guy, where he's taken a lot of donations from big money candidates. And it's interesting because people knew about that around the time where he started to re-drop in the polls. He had quite a big increase because of a lot of the money he was spending. And then once there was more media scrutiny, particularly in the left-wing press, as it were, he started to drop down, which is the same thing to happen to Warren, mainly because of her not being authentic.
It's her and her entourage's behaviour that has really kind of hit people, I think.
It's the sort of weird... She's basically become a slightly more left-wing version of Hillary Clinton now, which is not fun.
Which is basically just calling... Where Hillary called everyone who supported Trump, or could be... Not everyone that supported necessarily at that time supported Trump, but anyone that could have, I suppose, sympathies for... what that kind of populist wave was doing, she essentially alienated them, and that drove further support. That's essentially what Warren is doing to the left. of the party.
Yeah, I think that is true. And Warren really didn't help herself in 2016, where she didn't back anyone right until the last minute, where she backed Clinton when it was clear that Clinton was going to win, even though she ideologically aligned a lot more with Bernie.
Yep.
A lot of Bernie fans never forgave her for that, and I think this is coming out now, the fact that she's just completely dropped, particularly with the left of the party. It's more centrists that are going to Warren, weirdly.
I think what Warren and her team basically misunderstood when she joined this race, because she didn't really fight the last election, is, oh yeah, we can come in and we can be the contesting left-wing fight to Sanders.
Yeah.
Well, the problem is, Warren was never really seen as, until this election, as on the left of the party. She was kind of always seen as part of this sort of centrist establishment. Mm-hmm. She just kind of attached herself to the new, younger members of Senate, Congress people. So people like AOC, Ilhan Omar. She became this kind of orbiting figure.
Yes, she was trying to sort of go on the men's and I had her hang on their coattails, and then come up and say, but I will be appealing to the people in the centrist country, so I can actually beat Trump. So I have all the same ideas as Bernie, but I can beat Trump, which you're like, oh, and I'm a woman.
Yes.
Which, again, is playing a massive part in the Democratic primary, because if they figure it as an asset.
I think their fault was, if either her entourage or she thought, if we can attach ourselves to those quite popular with that kind of niche area of the Democratic Party, the new members of the Democratic Party, people who are generally more socialist than they are centrist liberals, or at least they're kind of pseudo-socialists, because all those members of Congress are actually too young to fight in this election, and also they're just too junior anyway to be able to run in this election. We can be seen as their candidate, the representative for them.
Yes, whereas that really backfired on her, because they all went back to Bernie Sanders. They're all campaigning for Bernie now. I mean, which is quite funny. They're campaigning for the old white man.
The Native American thing didn't help, because she thought, right, to gain those people, I have to look like a woman of colour. I'm a Native American.
But she'd been doing that for her entire career. Not even political career. She'd been doing it while she was a professor at Harvard. Harvard, for a long time, they've stopped this now, but for a long time, they had Elizabeth Warren listed as the first female Native American professor. She's like, what? And she had written a book, or contributed to a cookbook called Pow Wow Chow.
Whoa!
So
there was literally no native, just to put some context to this, there were no Native American ancestors. She was not Native American.
She did a DNA test about a year ago, which proved that she had something, at the very most, 1/64th Native American, which is about the average for all white Americans.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the reality is, that means there was no Native American culture in your household, or completely bringing this bollocks.
No, and she made up this story, or at least her parents made up this story, because she alleged that her parents said this story was true, that her mother and her father, I think it was her mother's side, her father's family disowned them and refused to talk to them because her mother was too brown, because she was so brown because she was Native American, which you see pictures of those parents and they're not brown at all.
No.
So it just absolutely doesn't make any sense on every levels. And people have been going, okay, you're actually quite a dishonest candidate. Yep. Like, you're getting almost to Trumpian levels of dishonesty here.
I mean, I really don't give a shit. I personally don't give a shit. Also, it's not my race either. I'm not an American citizen. But, I mean, I could give a shit, but I'd understand why people would say, oh, you're fucking dishonest.
Yeah.
I mean, you were using an identity to push forward a cause.
Yes.
And identity is not even yours.
Yeah. And particularly when you contrast her with her main rival in Bernie Sanders, and whatever you think about the man's policies, he is possibly the most authentic person in American politics for a hell of a long time.
Yeah.
On every single level. Even, I would say, definitely a lot more so than Trump, because he doesn't have the sort of lying dishonesty streak or everyday lies.
Yeah.
Little everyday lies is what I call the sort of Trumpian dishonesties. Whereas Sanders has been consistent ideologically, he's been consistent in the way he thinks, he's been consistent in the way he votes. He is very, very authentic.
I think
as
what
a
helps Sanders is he is a socialist. Well, I say socialist, he's kind of a pseudo-socialist. He's not a socialist as we know it in Europe.
No. He's an American democratic socialist.
He's definitely still to the left. He's definitely, if he was part of the Labour Party, he would still be to the left. But he's not as we think of it in the way of McDonnell and Corbyn. He's not an actual Western European socialist.
No, and he does actually acknowledge at least a lot of the socially conservative.
He's still, as much as he's he has his union causes, he's still open to the to free enterprise and the free market, and because I think he understands that you have no functioning economy without it, or you can't back up social structures without it.
Yes, he always goes to the Nordic countries as a model because he's very much aware that they have a capitalist base with a lot of social programs on top. I mean,
famously in the last election, or in the run-up to the last election, he... what the fuck was that?
That was my shower.
Oh, okay. Anyway, in the run-up to the last election, he put out a tweet saying, "We need to be more like a socialist European country like Denmark." And then Denmark's Prime Minister actually tweeted him back and said, "Actually, Bernie, we're not a... Thank you for telling us that, but we're not a socialist. Thank you for praising us, but we're not a socialist country. We are I'm paraphrasing, but we are a free market economy with a social system."
Yeah, which is what a lot of people would say in Europe, and we understand that sort of vocabulary. But in America, he would be defined as a socialist, and that's why you have people like AOC standing up and saying, "I'm a socialist," because in the American context of what a socialist is, there's still the implication of that capitalist base, or at least that's in the left-wing circles. But then in right-wing circles, they see the sort of old-school type of socialist, the type of European socialist, and that's what they think when they think of socialism. So you've got this weird sort of... They're completely talking past each other in this debate.
The problem is with that, it's confusing because you're absolutely, in that sense, you are not tying socialism to an economic structure.
Yes.
You're completely making it something separate, which, I mean, again, that is why these countries of Europe, particularly the Nordic countries, and also us to a certain degree, is why we are not socialist countries. We are ultimately free market economies that just have a social system that we had to build at the tail end of World War II.
Yeah, when there was the sort of national consensus or whatever it was referred to, where even the Tory party and the Labour party both agreed that to get through the combination of the falling empire and the impact of World War II, there had to be a hell of a lot more government intervention in the economy just to keep it going.
Because we were a destroyed country. I mean, we were blown to the ground. We had no money. Infrastructure had been destroyed.
And what money we were having was used to prop up our failing empire.
Yes, absolutely.
Which was, never a good idea.
Because of that, we had to drop a lot of colonies over the next couple of decades.
Yeah, this is the thing, and particularly for, as a sort of Conservative Party voter now, that is one thing which you've got to look back on and say, the Tory party got that wrong when they were trying to hold on to the empire there.
Yeah, she just completely dropped it.
Yeah, and Suez Crisis, implies that completely.
I think the last real amount of colonies we dropped, which were in the 70s, or the very early 70s, which were a lot of African and Caribbean colonies, that was under Attlee. And was Attlee? No.
Not in the 70s, it would have been Wilson.
Sorry, Wilson, not Attlee, my bad. So late 60s, early 70s would have been Wilson.
Yeah.
And, I mean, that was just essentially just an understanding of why do we do this, and we're in a different era, and we can't afford this.
Yeah. There is a historical question as to how we could have done it better.
I think it might have also been partly a populist backlash to Windrush as well. Partly. I think the kind of populist working class, I think, were going... Essentially, we need to cut these off as economies if they think they can just come here because they're part of the British Empire.
Right.
Because it's essentially now how a lot of reactionary right-wing people in America look at Puerto Rico.
Yeah, I can see that being a problem from their perspective, as it were. But I would say, there's definitely, I'd say, a historical question as to we definitely should have got rid of the colonies, but just the matter of fact that a lot of those colonies then, former colonies then turned into dictatorships.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you mean pretty much all of them?
Yeah, pretty much
from Australia, Canada, and...
Yes, we definitely, and even India.
Because India ended up as essentially a Chinese communist adjacent dictatorship. They weren't communist, but they were very open to both Chinese communists at different times and the Communist Party and to, at certain times, the Soviets.
Yes, and they had the Congress Party over there, which kept on winning election after election, so there wasn't really an semblance of democracy. And
we didn't have much of a functioning... our government didn't have much of a functioning relationship with it during particularly the 60s and 70s. Because,
no, it would not have nothing to do with us.
They saw us as the old imperial masters, and they were kind of communist adjacent.
Yeah, and I think that's only really changed since there's a lot more connection with our two countries now, just because of the amount of Indians that live
here.
in the thing. And, it's a very good benefit from having a lot of Indian immigration, is that we have a lot better relationship with India now.
Absolutely, yeah.
So just getting back to the Democratic primary, there was just one other sort of major event which I wanted to touch on and get your opinion on, Joe, which was the fact that Hillary Clinton has popped her head back into the news with this new documentary, which I saw a very amusing tweet from Ben Shapiro. It says, the last 5 minutes of a documentary is going to be fucking funny.
I actually literally heard about this just before I left the house.
Yeah.
I was listening to Chapo Trap House, the American socialist podcast, sort of comedic podcast. I don't know much about it. Inform me.
So Hillary Clinton has a documentary coming out on Hulu, I believe, which is just called Hillary, and it's exactly what you would have thought. It's a complete puff propaganda piece, justification of what it runs.
I was a woman fighter. I understood black people. I hate that way she speaks.
Oh yeah, it's very, very grating. But this is nothing new.
Yeah.
Mitt Romney did the same thing.
Yeah.
So it's nothing new, not to saying that this is uniquely bad for Clinton, but she was doing a press tour as a result of this, and what people are especially mad about is that people asked her to basically walk back some comments she made about Bernie and to say would she back him and confirm that she would back him if he won the nomination, and Clinton said no, he's still a really bad thing for the party, and was basically being a massive hypocrite because she criticised him for saying
because when I heard about this earlier today, I thought to myself, what is the likelihood of Hillary backing if Bernie was to take, because for some reason today we are talking as if Bernie will take the leadership, and we don't know that because
Biden's still the favourite.
He's still the favourite. I mean, only by 3 points as we last seen, but he's still ahead. And if anything happens with the Democratic the Congress, like in the last election, where essentially there is just a rush on the ground to make sure Sanders didn't take leadership, then obviously Sanders won't take leadership. But if he does, will Hillary fall back into line? And I think the reality is yes.
She said the day after she got criticised for it, she came back and said, of course I would nominate him because I hate Trump and all the sort of platitudes that you'd expect from her. But the fact that she originally said it really pissed a lot of people off and made people think, actually, this is a good thing because no one likes Hillary. So an admonishment from Hillary Clinton is actually basically an endorsement.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you remember in the last episode, we spoke about how partisan US politics is. Of course they will fall into line. They will fight for what they see as the greater good, so they will back Sanders. I generally don't know how likely he is he's going to be leader. I still think Biden, I think in my eyes, will be leader.
I would say that you're still a brave man to bet anything against Biden at this point, just because of his concentration on where he's got the votes is very heavily concentrated within the black community, which is very, very key in those southern states.
Absolutely. I mean, that is absolute block voting down there.
Yeah, it's how Clinton won last time, and it's probably how Biden's going to win this time.
We're going to talk quickly about the impeachment. Take it away again, because I've been veering into it, but it's just mainly reading into Russian-born assets of Trump, who was trying to make the deal, who was trying to make the point with the Ukrainian government that they will not receive aid, and now they've turned on Trump and gave evidence and. Yeah, take it away.
So it all goes back to the phone call, as it were, which I don't think we'll do a review of a play-by-play of the actual intricacies, because it just gets, as you sort of hinted there, really convoluted and, quite frankly, a little bit boring. Yeah. But the main thing is that it's effectively a political Rorschach test, where if you are pro-Trump, you're going to think this is a witch hunt, this is a complete partisan hackery, it's a complete misuse of impeachment and should never happen in the first place. And if you're against Trump, you'll say that any vote in the House to acquit him him is basically amount to treason, because this is exactly what impeachment was created for. So you've been having speeches by Adam Schiff, who has made his name as basically the guy who's been trying to go after Trump.
Schiff.
Yeah. Well, he's kind of, because he hinted for ages that he had the smoking gun of the Trump Russiagate thing.
But who would have thought it caused nothing?
Absolutely nothing. Like, it's a completely separate issue to what the Democrats have been going on about for the last 2 years, the whole Ukrainian phone call. And now he's basically in charge of the prosecution in the Senate, because he's not actually a senator. He's in the House.
Right. Okay.
So, but he's been giving speeches and lots of like emotional. We must have to do this. We have to do this, otherwise history will look back on us. And it's basically turned into people aren't really listening because the ratings are extremely poor. Like, they're not actually that much higher than a normal time for the news ratings. They're like about, I think at its peak it got 11 million at the start, which for an impeachment is nothing. That's like bog standard for a sports broadcast over there.
Okay.
So it's that the American people are not tuning in like they did for 96 during Clinton.
US politics is so partisan, and that doesn't just go for in the Senate or in Congress, that goes for the public. And the reality is, I mean, you know, as we know, the majority somewhat of the US is either Republican or conservative voting, or is Democratic but somewhat conservative leaning in terms of I suppose culture. They really just don't want to hear this. They really don't want to see it. They don't want to know about this impeachment. No. They do want to hear it, but they just want to hear it essentially foul and fall in its face.
Yeah, effectively, because it's it's become, like, there was a good article in the New York Times which was effectively making the argument that what impeachment has, and this is in the New York Times, I just underlined that, what this impeachment is actually a vote of no confidence. Because it's gone completely on partisan lines. No one has moved from one. I think there was one Democrat who defected to Republicans, but he was going to do that anyway. He just did it at the opportune moment to make it look like it was going to be an impeachment-related thing. But it's been completely down on party lines. All the arguments have been the same ever since this thing started. There's been no bombshell, despite what certain media outlets want you to believe. There's been no real change in the facts, no real change in the human motivations. And you can tell this by the fact that the Democrats don't want Hunter Biden to testify. This is the main sticking point. They don't want Hunter Biden to testify, but they do want to call their own witnesses.
What they're really screaming into a void is what it is. They nothing will come of this. It may backfire on them in the election.
I think it will, because I think it's going to rally Trump's base. And
absolutely,
They're hoping that it will rally their base more than it rallies Trump's base.
I think impeachment or not, in regards to whether this happened or not, I still think the Democratic Party is not going to take a battering. I think it'll be similar to the last election, where it will be close, but I think Trump will take this again. I think no one's really pretending. Everyone's concentrating more on the Democratic race, the Democratic leadership race, more than they're actually concentrating on the likelihood that the Democrats will win the next election, because the reality is it's not likely that Democrats will win the next election. People care more about who the contestant will be more than the actual likelihood of them winning the election.
Yeah, I think you're right about that, because it shows where the Democratic Party are going. It shows the direction and the power within these sort of different fractions within the party, where they can actually take it, so that possibly in the next election.
Very similar to how the Labour Party looks at its own race at the moment. They don't care. They don't think about who will win the next election, because they will not win the next election. It's mathematically quite impossible. But it's about which direction will the party go in.
Yes, and that is very important, as we saw in 2015, after they lost the Labour Party lost the 2015 Labour election. The fact that Corbyn won that Labour leadership thing, for the next 5 years, it was all about Corbyn's Labour Party.
Yes,
and so it is very important where the direction of the it goes, particularly for, I say, more for UK politics than Democratic politics, because there's only a year where that person is effectively the leader of the party.
I mean, it's not the same here, where you'll lose an election, the party leader will step down, and then you have 5 years of a new leader.
Yes, where they get time to sort of have what their government is going to be, even though they do effectively start campaigning as soon as the last election was over, or at least on a backroom type of level.
Yeah, I mean, so like Democratic or any leader in the States never becomes they never become a known figure really until they're actually president. Mostly.
If on a national scale, I'd say that yes, or at least until they get a nomination.
Yes.
That might have changed recently because of social media.
Yeah.
People know who Andrew Yang is,
yes.
and he only's been polling at most of the time, apart from his recent poll, at 3%.
Bernie also shows that buck of trend as well, because I don't want to call him Bernie, I don't know the man, but Sanders also shows that buck of trend because we've known of him for years now. And
yes, and he got very, very famous in 2016, and everybody knows who he is because he's sort of the measuring stick of Democratic parties. His 2016 run, there are certain means tests, to use a weird phrase. You need to pass Medicare for All being one of them if you want to run as a leftist candidate.
Cool. So next week, just going a bit off subject. Next week, unless anything drastic happens in the next week. Friday we leave the EU officially.
Yeah, it's been given royal assent, and I think the only thing that we need to happen on an official level is the EU Parliament to pass it, which they will do.
Yeah,
there's no doubt about that.
Essentially, what will happen in regards to on the night, I don't know. Apparently, there are going to be sort of mental Brexiteer parties and stuff, and I don't know who's throwing them. I know there's going to be a big celebration outside.
In Westminster.
Yeah. I don't imagine it's going to be that big unless there's a real busload of people coming down.
Yeah, I mean, the sort of where the vote takes place is there's just not going to be a lot of people, particularly as a lot of people who vote for a Brexit, working class people, they can't really take a Friday off coming down to celebrate and have a big party.
I mean, obviously, I think they're going to be celebrating around 11 o'clock at night, aren't they? Because when we're officially out.
We officially leave at midnight European time, so 11 o'clock UK time.
When we had this nonsense with the Big Ben's bell ringing a couple of weeks ago, where essentially we were told Big Ben cannot ring at 11 o'clock because obviously he's been out of commission for a few years now. It's being worked on, and to do it at such short notice would cost £500,000. Or was it? It went up. It went from 15,000 to 500,000 within the space of a few days.
Yeah, I'm very sceptical about that figure, but still, it probably would be a little bit.
Personally, actually, look, and as I've made the point before, I do believe we should leave the EU. I voted Remain. I would vote Remain again, but I do believe while the mandate was to leave, we should leave. I don't think the idea of ringing Big Ben out at the point we leave the EU, I think in London at least it shouldn't happen. London is a Remain city. London is a very different place to the rest of the country, and just on a personal level, I fucking hate being told that London's not really part of Britain, it's a different place, you don't understand the rest of the country, London's a different country itself. And then when it comes to the idea that, oh no, Big Ben must ring out, we then get told, oh no, but you're the capital of the country. Well, fuck you, you've told me for years that we're not part of the country. We're not real Britain, we're not real England, we're not. So fuck you. If you're gonna cut us out and make sure that we think we're, if you're going to alienate us from the rest of the country by telling us we're different and we're not part of the country, then fuck you, we're not ringing the bell for Brexit. That's what I feel personally.
Okay, I think that might be a sentiment that is shared with the people that run Westminster, not the MPs, but the actual building of Westminster, who are basically the ones who decide these types of things.
That's the thing. London was a 60% leave city. Ultimately, if you're the one who's if you're constantly going to, point out not just that we Remain city, but also we're just different. We're not real England. We're not real Britain. We are. We're full of foreigners, and I don't understand London. It's somewhere that just isn't. It isn't the country we know. Then fuck you. We're not going to act as the capital when you want us to.
Well, as a Leave voter, I'd say it was all a fuss about nothing.
No, absolutely. I'd agree with you. It is a fuss about nothing.
Yeah.
I actually, in reality, at first, my thoughts were, for days, I don't care whether the bell rings or not. Even as a Remainer, someone who voted Remainer, I hate calling myself a Remainer. I don't care whether the bell rings or not. But then it turned, when I thought to myself that being told for years that we're not British, just by way of being from London, or, London's not part of Britain really, then I thought, no, fuck you, we're not going to act as the capital when you want us to. When you said for years, London's not our real capital, our capital really should be up north, it should be fucking Burnley or something, then fuck you when you then say that. Again, I suppose it's all kind of symbolism, even from me, it's symbolism, and I'm not normally one for symbolism. But, I just don't like being told that we must ring the bell in our city when you're told us we're not part of your country.
Well, considering that, I can really... I sympathise with that sort of opinion, particularly as the person who's been driving this has been Mark Francois, who is probably the person who
anti-London.
You could legitimately make that argument to him in particular.
By the way, we talk about Northerners being very anti-London and talking about London as if it's from a different world. People from Essex, which is the adjoining county, are actually even worse at it.
Yeah.
They really, they fucking detest London. They see it as they would call it, a foreigner shithole. It's Londistan. So, fuck Francois. Fuck, he's kind of, well, okay, I don't care. He's got his political opinions and that's fine. He is a member of parliament. But, Francois leading this campaign, he actually has been leading this crowdfunding campaign to raise the money for it, to quote-unquote call Westminster's bluff.
I think that in the end it has completely backfired on him, because he's gone from being this person who was fallen aside to all the governments because of his hard Brexit stance to being this sort of comical figure of getting really angry about bells.
Yeah.
So, and the fact that there's lots of politicians have been saying the word bong makes me hopeful they'll legalise it soon.
Good luck. If the way we're going nowhere near that.
No, because it doesn't appeal to northern voters.
Absolutely not. Do you think if we legalised sniffing glue or solvent abuse in, if we had a legal intoxicant solvent, do you think the North would vote for?
What, legalisation?
Legalisation.
Well, I suppose it's technically legal, because you can sell the solvents now.
Well, no, because most solvents now you can't. There's no. No, true. Actually, you're right. Excuse me. There's a lot of solvents that have had the intoxicating element taken out.
True. Yeah.
So because of the amount of brain damage.
Yeah. It's a shame, because the kids won't get those videotapes that we used to get and get rolled out of these northern kids wandering around a council estate
sniffing glue out of bags. Yeah. That was brilliant. That kind of scarred my childhood.
Oh, that always seems like, who the fuck would do that?
Who do that? Burnley.
It's easier to get some booze.
It always seemed like a very different world. Like you'd be sat there in school watching the TV, and then you're looking at some grim place like Hull or fucking Sunderland with these kids in shell suits walking around in half dilapidated alleyways, going, "Hey, do you want to try this? It makes you go mental."
It was always 10, 20 years old over the years.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It was something from the 80s.
Yeah.
And we'd be sitting there the 2000s, early to mid 2000s. What the fuck? But anyway, closing thoughts, because we really should cancel this. Cancel it. Oops. We really should bring this to an end soon.
I'd say we'll probably give a bit of a podcast last week, but I think it's probably been good that the Brexit process we've been allowed to fuss over stupid things like the dongs, because it's not been the sort of tense, what the fuck is it going to look like in a couple of weeks.
It also kind of exposes the stupid symbolism that has driven Brexit as well. You must probably agree with this, which is, you may have legitimate reasons to want to leave the EU, but the problem is a lot of the Brexit vote, particularly from the kind of popular side of things, there are these dumb symbols and symbolism that drive everything. The bells of Big Ben ringing is just a sort of a symptom of that.
I would say that would be definitely true on the Brexit side, also of the sort of Leave side, as sort of the symbol of being a vote for Remain is a vote against racism. Yeah. That sort of...
Yeah. No, I'd agree with you on that.
Yeah. I'd say there's a lot of symbolism in sticking it to the man or sticking up for the man within the Brexit vote, just because it's such a big political event that it's hard not to have those elements baked into the cake, as it were.
Right, let's call this off now, because we are now well over the time we needed, time slot we needed. So, see you later.
See ya.